In this video, we will be discussing the very basics of parallel lines and some different vocabulary words associated with parallel lines. We'll go into much more detail once we get into this next chapter, chapter 5, but just wanted to kind of go through some of the basics, and there's going to be a lot of vocabulary that you're going to need to know in regards to parallel lines. Okay, so before we kind of start talking about parallel lines, I want to discuss what a plane is. A plane is a two-dimensional infinite surface such that any 2 points on the surface are connected by a line. All points of the line are also on the surface. Coplanar are points, lines, or segments all lying on the same plane. Non-coplanar are points, lines, or segments not lying on the same plane. A transversal is a line that intersects two coplanar lines in two distinct points. Based on this definition and looking at the diagram below, can you identify the transversal? Hopefully, you determined that C has to be our transversal because it's intersecting two lines at two distinct or two different points. So in this case, in this particular diagram, C would be considered our transversal. Once you've identified the transversal and the two lines that it's intersecting, anything between those two lines, that's called the interior. So anything between lines A and B is considered the interior. Anything outside of line A and line B, that's considered the exterior. So notice that you have an exterior at the top above line A, and then you also have the exterior below line B. Okay, so now let's look at some different types of angles formed by two lines and a transversal. Alternate interior angles are angles that are both located on the interior but on opposite sides of the transversal. Based on this definition, see if you can name a set of alternate interior angles in the diagram to the right. There are two examples that you should have named. Angle 3 and angle 6 are considered alternate interior because they're both on the interior but on opposite sides of that transversal. And also angles 4 and 5 are considered alternate interior for the same reasoning. R is your transversal, they're on opposite sides and both in the interior of P and Q. Now, alternate exterior angles, the same idea, except that both angles must be located in the interior. Both angles must be located in the exterior of lines P and Q. And since they are alternate, that means they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So see if you can name a pair of alternate exterior angles in the diagram. One example would be angles 1 and 8 because they are both located in the exterior but they are on opposite sides of the transversal. The other example would be angles 2 and 7. Now, notice that in both of these cases, I didn't name angles 1 and 2 as alternate exterior, even though they are on opposite sides. We know that angles 1 and 2 have a different kind of relationship. Angles 1 and 2 are next to each other. They form that straight angle. So alternate interior and alternate exterior angles, they are also not going to be supplementary. So keep that in mind with those two types of angles. Do not confuse them with supplementary angles. Now, corresponding angles, sometimes students have a little bit of trouble identifying these or remembering what corresponding angles are. Corresponding angles, one is located on the interior and one is located in the exterior, but they are on the same side of the transversal. So they're located on the same side of the transversal, but one is on the interior and one is in the exterior. Again, they are not going to be a pair of supplementary angles, so they must be different than supplementary angles. So one way to easily remember this is they are in the same spot but at different tables. So if you like to think of like these four angles here as a table and then these four angles as a different table, they're in the same spot at the table but they are at different tables. So that's one way to kind of identify them very quickly if you're having trouble identifying them. So same seat, but different table. So if we look here at our two tables, we know that angle 1 and angle 5, they are in the same seat, but they are at different tables. So that would be an example of corresponding angles. Angle 1 is on the exterior, angle 5 is on the interior, and they're on the same side of that transversal. There are 3 other pairs of corresponding angles. See if you can label them. Okay, another pair of angles you should have are angles 3 and 7, angles 2 and 6, and then angles 4 and 8. Those are all the pairs of corresponding angles in the diagram above. Now the next one is called exterior on the same side of the transversal. So that definition for these angles is exactly what it says in that name. So they are on the outside, but they are on the same side of the transversal. So there are 2 examples of exterior on the same side of the transversal. One example would be angle 1 and angle 7, and then angle 2 and angle 8. Okay, then next we have interior angles on the same side of the transversal. And again, we have 2 pairs of those. Angles 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. Supplementary angles, there are several examples of supplementary angles in the diagram. So take a minute and see if you can identify them all. Okay, there were 8 total pairs of supplementary angles, so double check and make sure that you have labeled all 8 of them. And then the last set of angles that we can identify are vertical angles. So go ahead and see if you can identify all the pairs of vertical angles in the diagram. Okay, you should have 4 pairs of vertical angles labeled, so double check and make sure that you have all of those labeled. So hopefully now you are able to identify all the different types of angles associated with a transversal and 2 lines that it is intersecting. These are all the different types of angles that you should now be able to identify given a diagram.